We are recording at this time, so thank you for being willing to serve on our instructional team. Stephanie and I had a chance to kind of chat a little bit this week and really want to hone in on a couple of pieces today. Our main objectives will be to kind of review our emergency instructional continuity plan that we had to quickly write in the spring and use for fourth quarter and make recommendations for improvement. We are very well aware that the grading section and the attendance section kind of caused the most angst, and we've received feedback about that. And moving forward, now that we know more and we're trying to act in a more proactive manner as opposed to kind of flipping the switch overnight, we know we can build out those structures a little bit better. So we want to be thinking about that, but really we kind of thought about that more as maybe a little homework piece for people to look at that document and maybe provide some bulleted notes with feedback so that we could spend most of our time today talking about Section 5 in what will ultimately become the new ICP with the updated recommendations from the state. So if you scroll down to Section 5 where it says content delivery, we've been doing a lot of research with other districts, and we actually had a call. Actually, Superintendent Byrd was in a call on Monday where there was a lot of discussion amongst the different superintendents about this particular section. And this is where some people are approaching their altered plans. Just for example, maybe a hybrid, or we were able to kind of tune into Leon County yesterday. And while they're much smaller than us, they have some of the same technology challenges and pockets of poverty that's more similar to us than maybe some other places. And so they're coming up with a school within a school concept for parents, which would essentially allow them to remain enrolled in their home school, but have virtual options. Potentially, maybe we can flesh this out either by quarter or by semester. So we want to gear our conversation around that today, because we feel like if we can get some, maybe some big ideas bucketed around this Section 5, it will help guide our work moving forward. So Stephanie, feel free if I missed anything or you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I know last week and with the whole messaging that went out, we knew the two definite options were Pope virtual and face-to-face open. And so within the ICP, we definitely have been looking at other models. I know Pasco has been, they had their plan come out. And so Pasco's plan presents some challenges for Polk, I think, because they're a one-to-one device ready, and we are not. And they are about 2/3 of our size and very homogeneous. So there are some issues with that, but I think Leon is probably more like us, even though they are smaller, like Michelle said. I had reached out to Broward's Teachers Union president because I saw, at least on Facebook this weekend, that their superintendent, Mr. Runcie, had announced they were doing a hybrid staggered schedule, and their Teachers Union president said, no way, this is something he wants, but it's not going to work, because they also, even though they're bigger than us, they don't have the resources to do a staggered, like what we had similarly looked at, that AB schedule. And so most of the districts that I've talked to with my counterparts, their districts are moving away from that staggered scheduled idea. And so I think the school within a school is a very good way to explore like a third option, so that kids can stay tethered to their homeschool or their school of choice if they've been accepted to one of our magnet schools, and so that they can still have that school environment. But if they can't come full face-to-face, and it's looking like, as cases go up, we need to have that third option solidly in place, because we might have to start with that. If things go bad south and the governor gets a lot of pressure to close again.
Yeah, and it looked like even in checking out some of Hillsboro's options yesterday, are doing a different bit of approach too, but they have e-learning as one of the options. And then so in the event that we either have a rolling closure at a particular school, or, if we had to go to a district-wide shutdown again, building that familiarity with all of our students and staff will be important. But it also, again, the most concerns that we heard from parents throughout since last Thursday evening really has been about not wanting to give up their spot, or even if it's not a spot at a magnet school, just their connection to their home school. So I think at least that, I'd love to hear from others in the group how this whole school within a school concept, what you think. So Lois, you have your hand up. Go ahead. I think you might still be on mute, Lois.
It should be toward, like, if you scroll your mouse. All right.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you. I heard from some parents recently in the last 2 days, major concern was that the published deadline for enrolling in Polk Virtual School is July 10th, I believe is what's published. And people are panicking over the need to make a decision. So I think maybe a primary goal would be to get the word out that I'm assuming that deadline will be pushed until a plan is in place. So that will relieve a lot of anxiety if people don't feel like they need to make that decision right now.
Mm-hmm. Good point. I've been answering those parent emails individually just to let them know. Heard from one parent that her child has some medical concerns and has an echocardiogram like on July 7th, and she just feels that pressure. So yeah, I think that will be important as well to message. Other thoughts?
I had one other.
Okay, go ahead.
I also read the Hillsborough County plan, and what they're calling their tethered option is My Home School. I thought that was a really clever double use of the term, that my home school, and I think that would be a very desirable option for parents.
Yeah, so I think Leon was either calling it their, whatever the school name was, Digital Academy, or, and then I saw some others, E-Learning Academy. So, just like with everything else in education, we're going to have to name it. So,
You gotta market it.
So, I wondered if, trying to see.
I think I saw Christy's hand.
Go ahead.
So I also heard from a number of teachers that had the same concern. They heard that option and they went to virtual to apply for jobs, and there aren't jobs because we don't know how many we need yet. So that was another issue about the communication and that type thing. If we do this, I don't think we have to ask teachers to reinvent the wheel. For our core classes, we have Polk Virtual, which is accepted by the state, which would be equitable across the district and so forth. And it would allow students to essentially jump in and out. The electives are where your challenge is, but having a teacher sit there at the school that maybe you would have had anyway, to be there at a certain time of day to answer questions while you're working through the Polk Virtual platform seems like a good way to use the resources we already have. We have to get more classes probably, and we have to address the electives because they're not generally on Polk Virtual. So we'd have to find people to teach or decide if it's even available. So parents may have to understand that if they do the e-learning option, the middle option, they may not get to do every program that we have in the county because some of them are just so hands-on.
Yes, and some of them are unique. Like if we think about our AP courses or different IB, those are gonna be challenging areas. And I see Beth Cummings has her hand up. So go ahead, Beth, because we know this is a concern for your area as well.
Yes, Christy, thanks for saying, I'll turn my camera on too, so y'all can actually see that I do exist. Christy, thanks for saying that. I'm in total agreement with you. And in fact, I sent a couple of wonder questions to Michelle this morning. Because for the electives, I think that is going to be our deal, because we cannot possibly provide all of the elective choices that we have virtually. So one idea that I had, and I have a little task for, and for those of you who don't know, I apologize, I'm the director of fine arts. So I have a task force of teachers that I've been working with during the summer, trying to get different ideas because I'm not smart enough to figure this out on my own. But one of the things we had talked about is developing our curriculum as a blended curriculum, because I think, Stephanie, what you were saying and Michelle was saying is so very real, that at any time we're going to have to pivot and get back into a, quote unquote distance learning. So we have to prepare that up front, period. Instead of, hey, we're doing that tomorrow. We're prepared for that. So some kind of blended learning. And one of the things that I think we could utilize is some of our technology where kids can, dial into a Teams meeting or a Google Classroom meeting or something like that, where the camera is just on the teacher, so we're protecting the privacy of the students that are in the class, but they could get the content, they could hear what's going on in the classroom, and they could practice alongside of that. Now, there are complications with proving that they practice that. They'd have to have 2 devices, but I have a solution for that in my area as well. And that doesn't need to be discussed here, but I think that blended option is going to be so attractive to parents who are worried. We have to develop a sense of trust with our parents and our students, that we're not just throwing them into a fishbowl, basically, but we're looking at, do some options that you're comfortable in. A second option that I thought of besides the blended is if they did, and I hate to even say that because I consider us to be very academic, but they're academics. If they did their academics online, can we figure out another option, and maybe it's not even a good idea, that they could go to school, especially our high school kids that can drive themselves, they could go to school to take their electives. So those are my 2 cents worth.
That's kind of what I was thinking, Beth. It's just some things that were swirling around in my head, was that if a family could or had the opportunity, if they wanted to do academics online, but I think, and Michelle kind of chime in here too, because I'm not sure the structural parts of Polk Virtual, but if they're enrolled in Polk Virtual, that's their school, would they be allowed, could we change that to where, in this sense, that they could take academics through Polk Virtual and then maybe do electives in person if that was one of their choices at their home school or their magnet program? Is that something we can explore?
Potentially. So I want to kind of loop that in with, I think it was something Christy mentioned, but then also Beth. So if I take all my core academics, if you will, through Polk Virtual, then I'm a Polk Virtual student for that. And it's not, I do not believe, based on a Polk Virtual meeting that we had, that students or teachers can access the Polk Virtual content through this whole within a school concept. So if I am a student at Bartow Elementary Academy and I want to take my classes with a teacher at Bartow Elementary Academy and my core, then that teacher would be developing that curriculum alongside all of our district resources and in that platform. But if if the teacher is teaching for Polk Virtual, then they have access to the Polk Virtual curriculum. So we have to remember that Polk Virtual is a franchise of Florida Virtual. So there is a cost associated per child for accessing their platform. They use a different platform than what we do. And then along those lines, just for transparency, I think I may have mentioned this in one of our meetings, but now that we're kind of in our instructional group, it's of it's more pertinent. We are moving forward with Schoology as our learning management system platform. That was a big complaint that we had from parents and teachers, that you got to log into all these different platforms. My own son was a poster child for that, ended up with 7 different logins for each class. So I, have firsthand experience with that as a mom and, through my son's perspective. So we are working on that. It is going, like everything else this summer, kind of fast and furious. And our team at the district level, like Dr. Barrios and school technology and some of our curriculum people, just started their intense training this week, so then they can support kind of trainers and teacher trainers within the school system. So it is very intuitive. It's linked, it's the same company, if you will, that we have unified through Performance Matters. So there's going to be so many similarities for teachers. But if we're thinking about this school within a school concept, those teachers would use content through Schoology and through our own textbooks, whether it's Reading Wonders, Algebra Nation. They're going to incorporate all those instructional materials that we essentially own as a district into Schoology and use those resources. They would not be Polk virtual. So to discuss, can a student be in either Polk virtual or their traditional school but e-learning and participate in electives, I think that's something we're going to need to explore. But then where is the balance, and do we only make that an option for secondary? I could see that probably being an quite honestly a logistical concern at the elementary level. I think it presents more challenges with parents driving and dropping off and more people potentially on campus. I mean, certainly come and explore it. But I think I have a note that I will find out from Darren Williams with Polk Virtual what that might look like. So I'll follow up on that piece.
And I know I have a huge concern with it as we're looking at blended learning. I think when I read Pasco's model, this was kind of glaring for me, is that they had the idea that they would be simultaneously broadcasting to students as they had physical students in their room. And I think that that's going to greatly increase our teachers' workload, because they're going to be dealing with online issues, because we know that kids are going to have online issues. And so if you have them together, if you have kids online at the same time that you have face-to-face kids, I think that that's going to present a problem. I think if we're going to look at the school within a school, a teacher would almost have to have a period to where they have a group of kids that are at home learning. And maybe they do a live feed like that. But I think it's going to get very hairy if we try to have kids trying to stream in at home while there are kids physically in the classroom. And so I definitely want to explore the blended learning, but I think we need to keep that in mind and possibly look at, like, if I'm teaching algebra, like I have a at-home virtual algebra class 5th period or 6th period or whatever. And then all the kids that are wanting to take algebra at Lake Gibson High School are in my virtual class that period. I think that we might need to look at it that way. And there's going to come equipment with that too. I mean, we're going to need to get cameras and even think about what that looks like in the classroom as far as contract language is concerned with cameras. Because I know that's been something that we have been very adverse to, is having cameras in the classroom. So we're going to have to flesh what that looks like as well.
So let's
So
just
my
take
concern.
is that hold on one second. Miss Little's had her hands up, and then Mr. Miller. So if we can let Miss Little speak, she's been waiting, and then we'll go to Mr. Miller, and then I have some things in the chat we need to tidy up. So go ahead, Miss Little.
Thank you. I agree with what Beth said earlier, but my concern is, and what I've been hearing from families, is how are accommodations going to be given to students with disabilities in that blended learning, and how are we going to provide support to students who are in extended transition? That's all I wanted to add.
And
Okay,
I'm
thank
going
you.
to add on to that. Not only that, our migrant students and students who can't access, that's very important. So
Yes, right.
in California, they're looking at different scale. I don't know if you do research over in California, but they're looking at scale labs and stuff like that in their communities to set up. So those kids who are not able to, you can actually send a physical, keep the social distance, send a physical teacher to these community environments where we're able to reach those students with disabilities, or vice versa, minority students who can't get into the classroom, who are at the higher risk, right? Because now you're talking about kids who are not have Medicaid and vice versa.
All valid points, all definitely things we are thinking about and talking about. Dr. Steinke's group with the whole child supports. If you had a moment to kind of peek at her agenda, they are discussing all of these items. So they're working on the instructional continuity plan with us, and they're once we get a little more fleshed out, there will be times where we'll need to collaborate. But that is a concern. Also potentially expanding hospital homebound for some of our students with extreme medical concerns that do still need that teacher interaction for their accommodations. So she's looking at that as well. Our migrant students have a very different set of challenges. And so how can we best support them? Might we, have a teacher that's going to go and meet them in a different location? Or so those are all things our English language learners that we have to address. I want to talk about, because this came up as well, about the deficits that our students will probably come back to school with. We had a virtual meeting with our principals and discussed some strategic extended learning opportunities for them. And we have strategic times within the year that we're going to target those as best we can based on, whatever the health conditions might be at that time. But we are working on that. We know students are going to need more time in small group and to be supported, and our most fragile students are going to need it the most. So they're the ones that I heard in a meeting that I was able to participate in, that they are kind of the new subgroup where there's been a digital divide. So the kids that do not have internet access at home, and so how they've not been as connected throughout this time. So we can, again, Beth and Stephanie, I think, had the question about Polk Virtual and how we do homeschool students. That was kind of my thought, and so I'll follow up on that. Ms. Hardy is asking about when Schoology is going to be rolled out. We are planning as fast and furious as we can. It will definitely be training on contact day for teachers, all teachers. We'll have a portion of the day, and we're hopeful, although I can't guarantee, that we may have some modules that might even be able to come out earlier. So if people want to start exploring them, they certainly can, but that's going to be a major focus of contact day district-wide. And then Christy's asking, so if a student wants to be tethered, we have to write content from scratch. Potentially, I don't want to say like from scratch, but it's I think in unique courses, electives and things, we're going to have to build things off of what we learned in quarter 4, and different things of that nature. And that's a franchising piece of Polk Virtual. Like unless the student is that student, we can't access that curriculum. Ms. Hardy's also sharing a concern about master schedules accommodating a separate virtual class. So any of the scheduling models that we're talking about with teachers and what Stephanie alluded to with, trying to avoid kind of a teacher having to do both that are in the same period or the same time frame, that's all going to be driven by student counts, right? Just like we normally do. So if we have enough students to make a pure online class for a teacher, an elective teacher especially, then that's what we do. If we have enough students at the elementary level that 20 of them have signed up to be virtual, then that's an entire 4th grade teacher that would handle just those students. I have a concern about some of our very small schools and that they may actually experience some of those pains of scheduling more than others. I think of Alturas Elementary comes to mind. You know, if they really only have 3 teachers per grade level, so if they have, depending on their student counts, you know, that could potentially cause a concern. So those are things, again, like Stephanie mentioned, we're going to have to work out with collective bargaining and how does that class load look. But we really need to know our student counts before we can really make informed decisions. Schedule me off. Yep, I think that Stephanie just typed what I said.
Well,
So-
and what I'm thinking along those lines too, like let's say Lake Gibson High School has 50 kids that want, you know, that are in an Algebra 1 cohort that want to do it virtually, but Winter Haven High School only has 10. You know, we could possibly work out to maybe where those 10 kids, you know, they're still a Winter Haven High School student, but maybe they are taking algebra, you know, with a Lake Gibson teacher online. You know, if we look at the numbers and we see where our kids at, we could alleviate it that way. It's going to take very creative scheduling and talking with other schools so that we know where our distributions are at and where our certifications are. Because Amy's right, we're going to have to match up certifications with teachers that can't or don't feel comfortable coming back face to face, and with students who are not comfortable or can't come back face to face yet. And so there might be, I think, at least the way I'm thinking about it in my head, is there could be some crossing, you know, if numbers are smaller at one school but larger at another, and that maybe for that course, they do take it with a Lake Gibson High School teacher for that section, and until they can go back to Winter Haven High School or feel comfortable.
Agreed. Another question was, do we have a good guess about how many students are seeking a blended option? Not really at this time. I mean, based on our survey, we had about 27% of parents that were wanting this option, but that's 27% of parents out of 25% of 100,000. So we have to keep in mind that you know, we don't capture everyone in a survey. And so Stephanie had mentioned something about a tentative registration. I think that's something we're going to have to explore, because really some of these decisions we can build the bones and the skeleton, but it's really hard to make a determination until we know actual student counts. And it's going to look different from school to school.
Yeah.
So we have quite a few hands raised. I think Vincent was next, and then we'll go to Lois and then back to Beth. So Vincent, did you get your piece in, or were you finished?
Yeah, I got my piece in, but
Okay.
on the survey, you said 25% out of 100 what? 100,000?
Yeah, we have a little over 100,000 students, and
So
so
less than 75% of the survey was answered.
correct. And
So
that's, unfortunately, that's pretty typical, but that's,
my
you know,
question
not
is,
everyone has the internet, so that's
you're
a barrier.
correct. So that would be my follow-up question. So how many represent families who don't have access to online education?
I
Yep.
think Michelle said it was pretty, like, at some schools you had, you know, maybe 30 or 40% of the parents replied, but at some schools you may have had 5, maybe 10%. And so I think the idea, maybe with this tentative registration, is that, you know, the district pushes it out, but school sites and school-based administrators and leadership teams are probably going to, or definitely going to need to follow up and call families, to make sure that we're getting as accurate of a count as possible.
Right. So in retrospect, it'll probably be, like you said, local schools, and really getting the data from local schools of how many kids actually participated this year in online education, so we can have a concrete number. Because right now we're talking and we don't really know what the solution is without the numbers.
Yeah, I think the survey and I call it a survey. I think we shouldn't call it a survey because that kind of implies that it's optional to fill out, but we really need to know. That's why I liked the idea of like a tentative registration, even though they're already registered in Polk County schools. Like, what are you thinking? Like, are you comfortable with going back face to face? And I'll tell you, some families may not have an option, even if they may not necessarily be comfortable with sending their kid. I mean, if they have to go to work to put food on the table, then they're gonna probably have to send their kid back face to face, and they don't have an option. And so I think we need to be sensitive to that too. And you're going to find that probably in our Title I schools, where we see a higher poverty rate. And so we need to be prepared for face-to-face learning for those kids, because it's probably not feasible for them to be able to stay at home. But we also need to be realistic in the fact that the numbers are climbing, and that we need to be able to work with those families. I really liked Vincent's idea of partnering with community centers, so that in the event that we do have to close, or a school has to close, like, we have partnerships in place that we can work with, and these kids can get help and resources when maybe our physical schools have to be shut down.
Mm-hmm. All right, Lois.
Thank you. I wanted to bring up the issue of gifted services in elementary schools, and the very probable situation where we'll have small numbers at each school of families that want to go online distance learning. And the idea, and this might fit some of the other concerns that have been voiced, of not necessarily the students having to switch to a different school to get those services, but let the teachers be itinerant. Let an online distance learning teacher be itinerant and serve multiple schools. That's what happens when we have small units in brick and mortar. So that's what will happen when we have small students in distance learning.
Yep, good point. All right, Christy, you have your hand up still?
Yes, I'm a big fan of the registration idea, but my other concern is I don't know what Schoology is. Is it just a platform, or is there content? Because if we're having to have, and I was a math and science teacher until I switched to a hands-on elective, so I see both sides. If we're telling an algebra teacher that they may teach online, but we don't have any access to any curriculum, every algebra teacher is going to be different. We really need to have some training this summer, which means we have to finish. And I don't mean training, I mean like have algebra teachers throughout the county, have history teachers throughout the county, have these different teachers, have them come and say, and write a plan, and then have the technology people figure out how to implement it. Because if we don't have a platform already, if Schoology is not a platform, then we need to have a way that the content is following the pacing guide in uniform and similar to what we're using at school, so that the kid that does have to pop in and out because of quarantine or whatever is getting the same instruction. So that's going to take time, which has to be paid for, and it's going to take dedicated volunteers to come in on their summer. But we can't ask them to do it the week school starts. We have to ask them to do it now. So
right. So that is one thing that the curriculum team is working on, and we hope to have a proposal actually for Stephanie fairly soon. What we're thinking is, some of the trainings that we used to do with teachers and pulling them out of school and having a substitute and everybody gathering at Jim Miles, to work on things, that's not really going to be feasible for the coming year. So a thought that we have is, rather than use that money in that regard, we want to do exactly what you're saying, Christy, tap into the teacher expertise that we have in the various content areas and pay them. And essentially the outcomes of those groups will be digital lessons that we can then put in Schoology for the different areas. So that's something I've been working on, Stephanie. So we hope to have a draft MOU for you soon, because it's essentially going to give teachers a stipend to help us do that work, and they're the ones that are the experts in that content area. So working with people like Joe McNaughton and his district level team, but with teachers that are math experts to help us do that. Some of it we do have. So everything that's in the curriculum maps now, the different resources, that team is going to move all of that over to Schoology for everybody. That's not going to be a burden that we put on the teachers. We're going to move all that at the district level, create the pacing, just like we have kind of the pacing in the maps, and all those resources that are there will be moved. And so the teachers will still have that, and the digital. So, the digital version of our textbooks, those assignments and things will be accessible for teachers as well. So it's not going to be entirely reinventing the wheel, especially in the core areas. Now I know for your case and some of the electives, it's a little different, but that's kind of where we're going with that. So hopefully that'll help with that.
Can I ask to clarify too? I'm sorry. So
Okay.
Schoology is essentially something like Teams or Google Classroom. It doesn't have any content. We put content on it. I had not heard of it, and I'm not technical.
Yeah, it's in a sense a learning management system. Dr. Barrios, are you in here?
Yep, I'm here.
You want to help answer that question about what a learning management system is?
Yeah, so what Schoology does is it essentially is a platform that allows you to create lessons, bring in content, organize that content. It does work with Teams and it does work with Google Classroom, for example. And as Michelle alluded to earlier, the challenge we have is Google Classroom is different than Teams, is different than some others. Well, this platform allows these other platforms to work within its platform. So pretty much once you log into Schoology, you'll have all your content, whether you've got documents pointed to your Google Drive or your Microsoft Drive, or other Safari Montage, for example, which is our video streaming. That's all going to be built in to that platform, or what I would say is it brings the content in to one platform as opposed to you going out. So as Michelle said, it is a learning management system. You do have to put content in, but you can easily bring that content in and organize your lessons.
Okay. And for these electives, these special case electives, it's possible, jumping on the itinerant idea, that you could have one drama teacher in the county that is willing to facilitate some sort of drama, and one ag teacher in the county, and one culinary teacher, not one per school, obviously, but one to do at least maybe the core classes that are like my upper level classes. I don't see how I could do virtually, but the ag foundations, that is the first class, which also is a science credit, there's a lot of academic content and a lot of that. I could probably do that one online, or someone could for the county. And so maybe that basic ROTC or whatever, maybe there's something they can do, but for the county, somebody writes it for the county as opposed to having someone at each school.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to be flexible with that, as well as the units like Stephanie was mentioning, and the itinerant concept that Lois brought up. All right, Danny, you have your hand up?
Yes, I just had a question, a couple quick things. With the Schoology, we really need to make sure that children that are on the site-based programs at the beginning of the year are shown how to use these things, because my students that are migrant in the migrant camps don't know how to get on these platforms. And a lot of the teachers were like, can you go out and show a parent how to get on Class Dojo, to an illiterate parent who is working during the day, who doesn't have an email address. All of that needs to be, like, the kids need to be trained on how to do that. But my question is actually about students with disabilities, like especially significant disabilities. Will they be also their curriculum put onto the Schoology, and also with therapies like OT and speech? Because those have been extremely hard to access. I have a son with a significant disability, and just to be honest, he's been out of school since March 16th. So that was my big concern. Will those students be taken into consideration? And would we need IEP meetings prior to this to have some of this added in?
I think so. I think that's, so to answer the first question, yes, we're going to have to train all of our students and teachers, whether they're physically in the building at the moment or we have to quickly shift back to school closure. So everyone's going to need to be trained. And we're very well aware of that. That's, all the hotline calls that were coming in about how do I even log into this? And so we're aware of that. And Dr. Barrios and Kitty Sawyer and the school technology team, everybody's working to that end to support that. And really throughout the year, whether it's turning in an assignment through Schoology while you're in the building, whether it's a teacher trying it out and having everybody log in. We've heard some districts that do a day a week where they keep it fresh and until everybody is really comfortable with it, and then they kind of implement differently as the need arises. So as far as OT, PT, speech, all those different therapies, and our students, especially our students on Access Points curriculum, some of it's going to be appropriate to house in Schoology and some of it might not. So I did have the chance to kind of hear from some teachers in another district about Schoology, and there are ways that you can build small groups and just work with that small group in a live setting. So I envision that maybe some of our speech teachers might be able to take advantage of that and different therapies, but we know some therapies really need to be delivered in person. And so how do we balance keeping everyone healthy and safe, but still providing our kids the therapies they so desperately need? So big struggle, but yes, I'll make sure I cross-reference that over with Dr. Steinke and the whole child support team. But we definitely have to do that and figure that out. And we've been doing some IEP meetings through different platforms, but we also have to be mindful of which electronic platforms we're using so that the privacy of all is respected and honored. And so good questions. Who else has their hand up? I can, does anybody else have? I will go to the chat real quick while we're, Miss Littles, did you have your hand up or was that from earlier?
No, that was from earlier.
Okay. Yeah, so Miss Hardy shared about Miami-Dade counting a login as attendance. I did see that and doing some research after Miss Bird kind of had her update superintendent call on Monday. We are seeing people that are going to write that into their ICP. So that was going to be a recommendation that I was going to make when we get to talking about that with attendance. If we write it into our ICP and then it becomes approved, then I think that's a way to potentially build upon this whole school within a school concept for students. Currently, and still, the same thing I said last week still holds true. The state has not issued any flexibility for seat time hours. So we do have minimum seat time hours that are required by the state. But I think in this situation, we just need to probably at this point write it into our ICP and say this is what we would do for online learning. Kind of that's modeled, a little bit in the same vein as Polk Virtual, but Polk Virtual gives like a wide range of time. So I think if we do a daily login and potentially even write a daily login or check-in with a teacher, because let's say I'm at my house doing my work and there's construction down the street that knocks out the internet for the day and I can't do my work. But if I call my teacher and say, our internet's down, I'm working on this, do we want to consider something like that for an emergency situation? Obviously, priority be given to actually physically logging in. We don't want people to abuse that system. But there are times, I think we've probably all experienced, where the internet's down and you're kind of held captive to what you can do. So let me get back here to the chat.
Well, and I think with the registration that would go out to students and families of which options, if they plan on coming face to face, if they plan on going virtual, if they want to do like the school within a school kind of idea, we need to have other questions on there about busing. Are they going to ride the bus in the morning and or the afternoon? Or are they going to be a car rider? We might even want to have a touch base, and I don't know if this can be housed in Focus or somewhere in Schoology to where an administrator can see it. But let's say they don't have access to a device or they don't have internet. If we were to pivot to full distance learning because the school had to be quarantined for 2 weeks, do they need paper resources? And so knowing that up front and housing that in Schoology, if that's possible, or in Focus, for that kid, an administrator can easily pull and say, okay, these are all my kids that need paper-based materials. And we can, I think what Christy was saying before, not reinvent the wheel where every teacher does all their own curriculum if it's going to be online, but have paper-based resources like the district did for elementary, ready to go and be printed for those that need that resource. And I think knowing that up front is going to make the transition a lot smoother. So having a registration, and I hate calling it a survey again, but a registration survey with all of those ideas will also help us with counts for busing and paper-based materials if needed as well. Or if they have their own device at home and they don't need a district device, that could help also. If they have their own tablet, then they don't need a district tablet and we can give it to somebody that does need it. So I think all of those things, having it right in one spot, and the sooner we can get this out, the better prepared we're going to be for plans, because it's really going to vary school to school, I believe. It's not going to be one district-wide, one size fits all plan. We're going to have to look at individual areas and schools and see where the need is. And like Lois said, with the itinerant labeling, shuffling teachers that way could be a solution to that.
Yep.
Oh, I like that. A choice census, Lois.
So let me just kind of capture some of the chat again. Danny was asking about, do we know what percentage of families in the survey are Title I? That wasn't a selection. We kind of sort out by school, but that becomes very challenging in our district when we're a community feeding program and all schools are getting free lunch at this point. So sometimes those numbers get a little bit skewed just because of the way the federal government captures them. But yeah, the timetable to find out numbers, let's talk about that for a minute. So what I don't want to do is send out another kind of communication that's not really fleshed out and causes more confusion to parents. So that was one of the reasons why we talked about we'll work in our work groups and then maybe kind of build out around July 8th. We know a lot of families and district office staff too that would be here to answer the phone, sometimes typically take vacation around July the 4th. So if we are mindful of that and building our plan out so that, hopefully around shortly after July the 8th, then we can have our work, shored up a little bit. And then I do think having parents, having a type of registration or people we can gather some more information and get numbers. Something else that came up was about, possibly teachers needing more planning time. I think Stephanie typed in there about how some of our fragile schools are coming back earlier. Those are things that, would have to be negotiated and we'd have to work out. But in talking about that, another thing that happens at back to school week that we have concerns about is orientation. We're not going to be able to bring, all 3,000 schools at Ridge, or students at Ridge Community High School in for an orientation. And so that's probably going to require us to rethink what that back to school week looks like to keep people in small groups that are coming in.
Honestly, I mean, I have very big reservations about even having an orientation in a physical sense. I think that orientation should be completely virtual because we also do not want, and I know that brings its own problems, but having the massive amounts of people that are on campus with a physical orientation scares the living daylights out of me.
Mm-hmm. I think we may have to, think about that in a different manner. And maybe it's one thing if my student is a general education student and, their teacher does a Zoom meeting or, meet the teacher night virtually, that's one thing. But I think for some of our families that have medically fragile students or students with disabilities that are going to be coming back in the building and perhaps, they might have a new teacher. I know one of my schools that I serve has a new access points teacher starting. I would imagine the parents in that class probably want to meet that teacher. So I think we're just going to be careful about taking things situation by situation and really being mindful of honoring, our parents are sending us their most precious gift. And if we're saying we're not, going to meet you or we're going to have to figure this out, I think there are going to be times where we may have to be flexible with some of that. And, maybe it's, they come in at a different time just to meet that teacher, but we're going to have extenuating circumstances that we'll probably need to honor what our parents desire for their children. Yeah, the sooner we can get Schoology out, the better. We totally agree. And so we're working on that. The CARES Act money, I can't really speak a whole lot about that. That's Mr. Perrone and finance and have to go through the board. But I think we have to be careful, with money because we still do not have a budget from the state. And so that's a little concerning. All right, I think we kind of got the questions in the chat. So I think we probably, just looking at our time, need to decide maybe confirm, because it sounds like we really want to iron out some details of this whole, whatever we call it, school within a school option for parents. So is that kind of this consensus of the group?
Yes.
A lot of head nods. Okay, so.
Yeah, I think that, Poke Virtual is pretty self-explanatory, and we already have those structures set up. Face-to-face is going to rely a lot on the operational protocols group, because they're going to have to be fleshing out, what happens if that. Go ahead. Sorry, Vincent. Go ahead.
No, my phone was breaking up anyway. I'm in my car. So I said, I like the idea. I would just like to get some hard information from the ground hard. So like if we get that survey out to the teachers to actually see how many students actually participated this year, I think we're talking around in circles. Without knowing that data, it's going to be very hard for us to come back and say what we're going to do. So I think initially we need to put that survey out to all the local schools and say, hey, this is the actual number of how many students actually participated in online learning. So then that comes back to the group, and we can say, oh, well, 50% of the school did or did not participate. Now we can have these hard conversations of what's next.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, Vincent. In all honesty, I don't know that we have time to do that. And I don't know that information will be totally clean either, because when we quickly transitioned to online learning and we had so many different platforms, we've been trying to answer that question at the district level. And so it's hard to answer that question. We have some numbers I could potentially share with you about student logins to different platforms, but when you total them all up, and if you use even my own son as an example, he logged into 7 different platforms, so he's going to be counted 7 different times. And so we captured the information in the manner that we had available to us at the time, but in the absence of a learning management system, it's really hard to capture that information. I think we're just going to have to go forward. We know from our families this is something they want, and so I think we're going to have to just build the structure and then work forward with the registration. Really, because in fourth quarter they didn't have an option. They just that was the only option because of school being closed.
I hear you, and I understand that. I still think we should have some data of who did not log in at all. I think that information is important. And maybe especially Ms. Higgins, you can maybe chime in for our minority students. That information, we need to know that information, because how can we even think about teaching next year? And we know that we're not reaching 35% of our population.
Yeah, and we're going. I think we're going to find that those students that don't have internet access, or their parents do have to go to work, like Danny was saying, those are going to be our kids that are coming back to school because they don't have the luxury, if you will, of really even having an option. Their parents have to go to work. And so I see.
And I hear you, and I think I hear that conversation, but my Haitian Creole students are the same parents who are scared to let their kids outside because they don't know the knowledge of the disease. So they're not even letting their kids in my program, right? I have about 300 kids in my program. And my Haitian Creole kids are not even letting them go outside the house. So as much as they probably need to go to school, they're scared of their child's safety.
Okay. Danny, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mentioned in the chat about the packets, and I didn't love the packets, but I think some of the schools were like, well, if the parents were really interested or wanted their kids to keep, they would come in and get these, or they would, it's the parents' responsibility. And in a lot of our communities, it's not that the parents don't want their children to do these things. But I think one of my biggest concerns right now is we're seeing a spike in COVID in some of my area and in some of our migrant areas. So we need a plan. If those kids can't go face to face, they can't do the online learning, it'd be good just to have something prepared that we can say here, rather than, in a week we'll get it. And, it's all like, this teacher gave 50 pages of something, this teacher gave 1 page. I mean, it'd just be a lot easier to have a plan, because we do need to anticipate a spike.
Yes, okay, and maybe I misunderstood. I do have down, like, so even if it's a school, even if it's in a school within a school concept, but if I have the preference to flex to e-learning or a paper-based version, I think for our core content areas, that's a little easier to achieve than some others. So, okay, I think I understand the question better now. So thank you. Amy's asking to clarify school within a school. Basically, you're still a student at Fort Meade Middle Senior High School, but you may not be physically coming into the building. You're either doing your learning online, or if you do not have internet capability, and we weren't able to provide you with a device or a MiFi or something. There may be cases where we can supply that to students, and we're working on that. Dr. Barrios and her team are ordering more devices, more MiFis to help support our students. But might there be a paper-based option as a kind of last resort for students that need that? Okay.
Michelle, can I ask something about student accountability?
Certainly.
I feel like that was a frustration of teachers excessively, but I also feel like we've created an unfair expectation among our students and parents as to what online learning is. So a lot of them may want to do this school within a school because I think it'll be easier. It's not for a health concern reason necessarily. It is, obviously everybody has health concerns, but they don't have a specifically medically fragile reason. They just feel like it's safer. If we have a student that participates in the school within a school, but doesn't participate, they don't sign in, they don't complete work and so forth, can we put language in there that they need to return to an in-person setting, so that, it's, I don't want to say it's a threat, but it's kind of a, look, you're signing up for this is a kind of a privilege, and if you don't take advantage of it, in order to get your child the credit, they're going to have to come back in person because they're not able to manage themselves. Because again, I think a lot of our kids are expecting that one assignment a week or whatever we ended up doing, and may not realize that they have to open the textbook and do the work and everything they have to do. They have to do what we do at school. So if we do this, can we have language that if they choose the school within a school and they don't participate, or if they choose virtual and they're not achieving certain benchmarks, certain percentages by certain dates, they need to return to the physical classroom?
Well, and doesn't Poke Virtual already have something like that? They already have that mechanism set up. So I think if we follow maybe something like that with that school within a school idea, we already have it set up with Poke Virtual.
Yeah, I agree. And I think clearly communicating that this is not going to be a situation where you can't get less than your third quarter grade. This is, and the time frames. I think that, if you look at Pasco's plan, they kind of clearly talk about, the minutes in an instructional day. So if we tell parents, this is a school, like I'll use elementary as an example. This is school within a school. You can expect that your child will have 120 minutes of ELA every day, 90 minutes of math, 45 minutes of science. I think we need to be upfront about that to combat exactly what you're saying, Christy. Or if they're in the high school, you can expect that your child, will have this for first period, this for second period, that their school day is from 7 to 2 o'clock, and that they would have homework, just as they would in addition to this time as well. So I think clearly communicating that before parents, kind of make their choice is important as well.
So with this time frame, the July 8th or 12th, I can't remember which one it was, said, that's a month before school starts. That's 4 weeks. While we don't want to put an announcement with any specifics, Hillsborough in their announcement said there would be a registration survey. They said that. So can we at least say to the public on this date, there will be a registration survey and you will need to complete it by this date. Please watch for details. If we can start publicizing that, we don't say anything. We won't get anybody mad. And then people may give us input about what details they want. But we can say there will be for like, say, the July 8th through 12th, those dates, there will be a survey where you can pick the option for your student, and full details will be available for the options. And that's all we have to say.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're watching. So if they're on vacation July 8th and they didn't even know it happened because they left Saturday and they didn't know it came out. So can we start now publicizing, deciding on a date for the registration, publicizing it? And then that also gives 3 weeks for the schools. So the elementary school that has, 50 kids that never responded to anything, they can try to call and contact those people. Maybe they move,
Yeah.
Maybe they just show up the first day. We don't know.
I think that's, I think that's something we're going to do, and also as Mr. Hill was saying, in the transparency of these meetings, we're fortunate. Jason Geary's in our team. And so he's hearing all of this dialogue and will help us try to find a way to digest the information and make it clear in a manner that is, a little easier for our parents and all of our stakeholders to kind of understand and really be able to make an informed decision. So I think one thing that would help maybe Stephanie and I in getting some of the objectives accomplished. I hear everybody. It sounds like the consensus is we want to move forward, trying to flesh out school within a school. We need to make some decisions around, recommendations. Actually, do we want to say, if you make this decision, you're sticking with it through quarter one? And I'm seeing some head nods. And then I think, if we did it by quarters, then you have a grade that's clean and transfers in. I think, Amy, I see your comment about semesters. I have a little bit of a concern about a semester because of the reasons Christy was saying. If a student's not being successful, then that's where towards the end of the quarter, that guidance counselor or that administrator needs to have that phone call and say, hey, this really isn't working. Your child's going to be in jeopardy of not earning their credits and or not passing to the next grade level. I'm almost thinking, and just the nature of the times that we're in, a semester commitment might be just a little too long. That's just my personal opinion. I, of course, want to hear from the group, but I tend to lean more towards a quarter.
I like the quarter.
I know why our high school friends favor this semester. I get it. But I think, a quarter might be easier for our parents too. Plus, we don't know, what things might look like come October when the quarter's up.
The quarter also lets our high school students do a grade recovery packet for the student the quarter they didn't do, while they're actively doing the second quarter of that semester.
Good point.
Hello, Michelle.
Yes.
Hi, this is Mr. Gray. How's everybody doing? I have a question for just clarification purposes. I've had several teachers reach out to me at Laurel, and the school within the school, I think it will sound very favorable to them, just from the responses I've gotten. I've also had teachers ask me about what will happen if they sign up for Polk Virtual. So my question is, as an administrator, if I have a teacher who opts to sign up for Polk Virtual, will I then lose that teacher and have to rehire for that position? How will that work?
Potentially, but no one's signing up for Polk Virtual yet. That's unless Polk Virtual has a specific job posting and they've interviewed and accepted it. We have not shifted any additional units to Polk Virtual at this time. We're still trying to get the pulse of that. And really, that's not really the intent. The intent would be to, and this is, of course, Mrs. Porteous's area of expertise, so I'm not going to delve too much into HR. But if we're capturing, I know they're trying to figure out a way to capture information about employees over 65, employees with underlying medical conditions, and how do maybe they get a priority if the unit needs to be shifted. And we have contract language about when you lose a unit and how that happens. So those are all things that are woven together like a spider web. We have to know first how many students we're talking about in these different settings. Then we know where to shift the teachers. So for right now, Roderick, to best answer your question, I would just encourage your teachers to stay up to date on the information, to know that we are working on a plan. These are unprecedented times for everybody. We're collaborating and working together to try to answer these very hard and complicated questions. So there will be a time when we know better, and kind of are able to see where the units are needed. But right now, I would just encourage them to just I know it's hard, but just be patient. And these are anxiety-ridden times, but we're working on it.
And that's what I've encouraged them. I let them know we're very transparent. So as we make further decisions, we're pushing that out to our staff and to the community. And they were just, concerned. And I think with the school within the school model, that if we not only get a good picture for students, but for teachers as well, it will help administrators be with the operational side of it. We can start the school year off saying, all right, hey, I know this teacher will be for this grade level, for the school to school model. So I'm all for, just using that term survey, but getting a good picture of, the students, but also for the teachers who would be willing to do that school to school model, so that as administrators, we can have the right communication filtered out to our families, to our communities, to our teachers, so that we all can be successful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Michelle, why can't we get that teacher information now? Because we're not giving them any, we're just saying, I am comfortable going back in person. I am not comfortable. We need, it's just a simple question. And it's, I'm not comfortable because I have health conditions, or I would rather not because I'm just overall concerned.
Yeah, they were working on that in the other group today.
Okay.
So it's being worked on. It's just not one of our objectives.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe Tedra Porteous is chairing the operational protocols. Mm-hmm. And I think their group is working on, those protocols of, what if this happens, and, we have to pivot, looking at the HR side and gathering staff data. And just from talking with teachers and staff, there are teachers that would be comfortable coming back if everybody had to wear a mask. And so there are some caveats to people being comfortable coming back, to where they wouldn't be comfortable if people were not required to wear a mask. And so I think, and I know that our people on the operational protocols are addressing those issues. I think within our committee, we need to focus on the student data gathering so that we can better formulate our plans, because really, our plans are contingent upon how many teachers are going to wanting to go virtual, but really I think the bigger portion is getting the data on students and families. And then we will be working with the operational protocols on the teacher end. At least that's how I've kind of viewing it.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'll get what we have from quarter 4, just to share as a point of reference, and I'll follow up with Hope Virtual. We do and get some information about what does it look like with the part-time electives versus in person, or maybe doing your core on Polk. Darren already has that, and then also the mechanism about accountability. So I think we need to decide when we're going to meet next. We do know, so when we kicked off today, we know these work groups need more time. So that's why we kind of said we'll work and then come back together whole group July 8th. So we can just take some recommendations of when we want to meet again.
So what questions do we need to get answered before we meet again? I guess we need to get the idea of of how to deliver the content or how to do the electives, or, you know, what can we, is there a homework we could do individually to help speed that along?
I think homework is, I think, looking at the other version of the ICP and providing feedback around grades and attendance are kind of our priority for that. So if everyone can look at the ICP, it's in the folder, especially look at the sections on grades and attendance. And if you have some recommendations for draft language, especially about if you are in a e-learning setting or a distance learning setting, what attendance might look like. And you know, I think that would be incredibly helpful. And then I think things about, do you have a device at home? Do you have internet at home? Do you need a paper-based materials? I can talk to DJ about, is there a way for us to capture that in focus? Because just like we have home language, like if you want your report card printed in Spanish, or you need the robocalls to go to you in Spanish or Haitian Creole, we have fields for that. So I think that might be helpful. But I also don't want to automatically think that just because a student doesn't have internet at home, that we can't give them a device or we can't give them a MiFi. We need to train our kids for the workforce that they're going to experience one day, and they need to know how to, you know, use the internet and use a device. And so, you know, if we could have some devices for some of Danny's students and some of Vincent's students and provide them with a MiFi, would that keep them from not having to have a paper packet, and they could be working online and collaborating in real time with their peers? Because we know that's one of the big pieces that's missing from distance learning. When a kid just gets a paper packet, let's be honest, they're at their kitchen table or sitting on the floor or wherever, just working on it, and they're missing that social interaction. So to me, that's a last resort. I would rather work with Dr. Barrios and her team, and how do we find that kid a device and a MiFi before we go to a paper packet, so that they can still have that social interaction.
That conversation is great. I think that goes back to if we could also install those community centers where we can teach that situation as well to those students. Would pitch that idea, because a lot of it is not if I can get on the computer, it's a learning barrier from a lot of our students, and a language barrier.
Yep. But if we can train them, I know they can do it. I know they can. I spent almost all of my career in Mulberry with Danny's kids, so I know they can do it. So
Vincent, would your kids, if the rec or a church or something like that offered a internet site so the kids could bring their devices to this thing and work there?
That's a goal. Yeah. So
would your parents do that? Because it would be a smaller group than 2,400 here at Winter Haven High School, but it is still around other people. Would they be willing?
Yeah, I think we'll be able to do social distance at the rec or at the churches. I think we really do, honestly, in all honesty, need to look at those partnerships and see for those kids who can't get on the bus or who can't get to class, and have, you know, a teacher come in and teach those barriers that they don't know how to do. I think, honestly, that's the way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we had central sites like that, we could even possibly do a lunch program at those sites.
And so now we're looking at,
which is another issue in that
staff.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that would be good homework also for people, that if you have a list of community centers, that are located within our communities that need it the most, and maybe you have a contact, gathering that list and contact name, phone number, so that we can begin to start building a bank of where we may need to provide those options.
Some churches may be willing to, because they're usually vacant during the week. Vincent, I know you're strong in Winter Haven, as I am. Do you know people in Lakeland and Lake Wales and Haines City that can do the same thing?
I do. I have a list actually of just community partnerships that I use with my Aunt Sharitha Tinsley. So I can get that list to you of people who are probably more than welcome to partner with us if we just reach out.
It sounds like you have the relationship. You would be the one, but I only know about Winter Haven people. So it sounds like you've got relationships already to build on, and that gets that many more people out of the cafeteria here. And that I'm not excited about teaching in person, so I want it as safe as possible. So if we get some of those people off site, that's less people in the cafeteria, that's less people in the halls changing classes, all that stuff, which inherently makes it safer.
And I think that's a good plan, and let's work on that list from all of our collective contacts, and we can begin building that. If you want to drop it in our OneDrive folder, and then people can add to it, that would be great too. And then Amy's bringing up a point too. In some of our municipalities, some of the community centers might be city owned or city operated. So just keeping in mind is still a backup plan of if we all get shut down, then they may be susceptible to getting shut down as well. So good thoughts, good strategies. All right, so I think we've got some homework.
And Christy had already started developing a survey, like the school census. I really liked the choice census, Lois. So we can build off that and share that in the OneDrive, and we can maybe tweak that throughout the week too. Do we want to try to maybe meet Monday morning if that's possible and so we're meeting maybe twice a week to just come back together?
That works.
Stephanie, when is our meeting for the focus group?
The focus group for PEA is at 1:00 on Monday. Okay,
so if we met Monday morning, we would be able to be current on that too. So that would be good.
Yeah.
So what
do we want to say 9? Does 9
Monday
work for 9? Everybody?
Beth already has a 9, is asking for 10.
I can do 10. I'm fine with 10.
10 works for me as well.
10 works.
Okay. I don't mind copying the same Teams link with all of our names and things on it and just plopping it at Monday at 10, and then we'll still plan on Wednesday at 9 as well. Sound good?
Yep.
All right.
So by Monday, should we start discussing that ICP, like going through it and making changes? So
yeah, so let me just I think the former ICP, yes. The other ICP, the current draft that's in there, that's on the page, I'm looking at it right now. I think some of it's going to be carryover and some of it's already there. I've got our instructional team kind of working in the background to do some of the formatting. I mentioned this to Stephanie to kind of copy and paste so that we're not reinventing the wheel. A lot of the components we already have are there. And I think if we can get this school within a school concept, that would help. That's
I see your
a good
point,
point.
Amy.
I see your point, Amy. I think we just let's not worry so much about naming it just yet, and let's get the details. And so good point. We do want to make sure our consensus. So we need to get to the hands, and then we're going to wrap up. So Jason, I saw your hand up for a while.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Just looking at communication-wise, some stuff that you guys were discussing. I just wanted to kind of go over it and make sure I understood, and also kind of get some ideas on what you think we should strive towards or work towards goal-wise. I know that you'd mentioned that there's, Michelle, that there was going to be an extension on Polk Virtual's deadline. And I think some folks said that would be important to communicate. Is that something that we need to communicate today? Is that something that we need to figure out? We had also talked about working more towards like a July 8th in terms of sort of unveiling what the third option would be. Because it's my understanding we have campus learning, we have Polk Virtual, and we're designing a third option to also be what I think we call school within a school, where you'd have a student who would be sort of attached or tethered to their home school, and they would be able to be part of that school, but they would be distance learning through some sort of online option or perhaps a paper-based option. And this would be for students who can't physically go to the school or do not feel comfortable or medically are unable to go to the campus. And this would be an option that they could use. And it would also be an option that all of our schools could pivot towards if there was a school-wide closure or a district-wide closure. Is that right?
Yes, I just want to caution us about, we have a lot of negative feedback from families about paper-based packets. So I just want us to maybe not even, at this point in time, while we're still working on details, maybe not even specify that piece. Maybe we just say school within a school that provides a distance learning option. I don't know, unless somebody's got some pushback on that. Like, I think we need to be very careful about the communication this time, because the last 2 weeks we've had concerns. And so I also don't want to confuse people either any further, or cause any additional angst. Everybody's got a lot of stress right now, and we don't want to add to it. And so I think let's really think that through and think about what to do. As far as extending the Polk virtual line, we may need to just have the other option ready when that time comes. I don't know, that's my concern, that we'll have more information coming soon. What I don't like is if we put something out and then we still have parents waiting and wondering what's next. I think we need to be careful with that.
I think what we're trying to balance here is being transparent and making things like these work sessions available. So if people want to watch them and wanted to see what we're talking about, we have them there. The problem is communicating when things are in flux and you're designing and developing something. It's hard to let people understand and know this isn't set in stone. We're still developing it. We're still doing it. So I understand that that's the sort of challenge.
I think that you said it perfectly, Jason.
It's still in flux.
Everything is just very, very fluid and in flux right now. And I'm all for making these public, with the understanding that they know that nothing is solid yet. That this is just discussion. We're in the beginning stages of really fleshing out and hammering out details. And that still things need to be coming to the employee unions to negotiate with working conditions, not just with PEA, but with AFSCME, because these working conditions are going to affect their employee groups as well. And so that this group is a discussion. We're starting to, really put together well thought out plans, but it's still, like you said, in flux.
And if you could, I know you're great at this, Jason, but find a way to word it like they just don't have to feel the pressure to commit to Polk Virtual right now. More information is coming, and other options, especially this school within a school option, are really being discussed heavily, and that we've heard their concerns, I think, and we're trying to work, still within our parameters of the state. I really want people to understand that part, that it's not the intent of the district, nor I believe, PEA or AFSCME to, not have something firm. We understand the sense of urgency. We know school's going to be opening very soon, but we also have to work within the parameters that we have. And so keeping that in mind, I think, is important for families to know too, and understanding that every district is unique. And so just like they hear something coming out of Pasco, the general public doesn't really know that they've been one-to-one for years, and they already have a lot of these things that we just simply do not fully have in place yet.
Could we announce, maybe with that watch for the survey thing, at the time the options are announced, you'll have the opportunity to pick which option. So we tell the parents, essentially, you don't have to pick now. You don't have to. The whole virtual window will reopen for fall registration and all that stuff. So we're not making them rush off and pick.
Yeah.
So I just feel like if we tell them a specific date that something's coming with full details, it'll relax everybody, and then we can get it nice and pretty and have all the details and all that stuff. But we need to tell them that something is coming, and we need to tell them that they are not losing options now. And we also need to tell teachers that, like, they're panicking because there's no jobs on virtual yet. Well, because we don't know how many we need and all that type of stuff. So if we can tell teachers that there'll be a hiring window for Polk Virtual at the time when we know the need. maybe.
Yeah.
Because they think the transfer window is over and they couldn't go to Polk Virtual because they've just, a lot of people were concerned and they were hitting the transfer button that day just in case they needed to go to virtual, not realizing this was a special case. So,
Yeah.
and that
That's a great point, Christy.
fairly easily without confusing much, that when the need is determined, Polk Virtual spots will be opened. At this time, we don't have any because we don't know the need, because they're kind of panicking over the few spots there are.
Yeah, so I think with communication, you know, we just want to be very upfront that all of this is still in flux. We're working on getting a student registration type questionnaire out to families so that we can better see where the numbers are at our individual schools. You know, the same is happening on the staff side in another committee, in the operational protocols committee. And obviously at some point we're going to have to work with the other two committees, you know, when we come back, because we're not siloed. All of this is, you know, interweb together. And that, you know, we know the definites are Polk virtual and face-to-face, and that we're developing a third option, you know, that school within a school possibility. And I think we want to move away from using the word hybrid, because hybrid means different things to whoever you talk to. A hybrid model could be this original staggered schedule that we had talked about. Hybrid, you know, is that e-learning school within a school. And so I think we want to be specific in what we're talking about, because hybrid lends itself to interpretation. And so whereas school within a school is a hybrid model, it's not the staggered schedule model that is looking to be unrealistic across the state. And so when people say hybrid, I think we want to pivot them to more specifically what we're talking about, in that tethering to your homeschool and school within a school option for distance learning.
Yeah, I think I see Lois there mentions that the school within a school has been used before, so we don't want to necessarily confuse anybody with it. So just as far as communication goes, is there a goal that you would like to be able to provide this sort of update to folks, i.e. that we're working on a third option, you're going to be surveyed to find out what your interest level is?
I think it would be after our July 8th meeting. So sometimes close, you know, after July 8th.
But we could tell them it's coming before July 8th.
Yeah.
We just wouldn't want to put it out. Yes.
Yes. And so
That's what I mean. I know that like around July 8th, we're hoping to have something a lot more solid, but do you want to put something up before that to just let them know that something is, that we are working on a third option, that more details will be provided on that?
Right.
I think that's okay. And I think using like tethering to homeschool or school of choice or magnet school may clear up some of the confusion that Lois had pointed out in the chat. So maybe not school within a school. You know, we're looking at an e-learning option that tethers you to your current school or your homeschool or your school of choice.
Yeah.
Can we come up with a name today, something so we all use the same name and quit using hybrid and don't use something like school within a school or something like that? Can we come up with a name?
I definitely do not want to use the word hybrid.
No,
but if
please not. Yeah, and I think sometimes school within a school and maybe even some of our academies, sometimes that language is confusing. Choice, magnet, anything around that is confusing. And so Lois is suggesting that we're working on 2 distance learning options, one via Polk Virtual and one through your homeschool. I think that's pretty clean.
Yep.
That's excellent. Yeah.
Yep.
And just to go, I kind of like us using the distance learning language because people are familiar with that. And I think it gives us that flexibility. Like Danny was mentioning, you know, to get as many kids online as we can, but to still honor our kids that may need a paper packet. Because that was my hesitation in not wanting to call it e-learning, because it might not be e-learning for everybody. It's going to be e-learning for as many people as we can. But I think distance learning still, and I think we need to be mindful of that too in the ICP, so that I don't want to use words that could potentially negatively impact our students if they have to go to a paper packet, and they get questioned about seat time or their attendance or what their attendance looks like. So we want to be mindful of that as we're making recommendations for draft language in the ICP as well. So keeping that distance learning kind of mindset, I think would be helpful. And it's about the survey. So when we sent out the survey, they were available in Spanish and Haitian Creole online. They were also available when we did the phone survey initially, when we went to distance learning to try to capture who had computers or not. The phone call did go out in Spanish and Haitian Creole if that was their selected preferred language and focus. So we do have the ability to capture some of that information in a survey, if you will, via phone call. So a little more, we can't go as in depth as we can with questions on the online version, but if you recall that original, do you have a computer? Do you have the internet? That robocall that went out in March, that piece, we can. So we did have a question in the chat from our student that's with us, Nicholas. We appreciate you. He'll be a senior at Winter Haven High School next year.
Hi, Nick.
So,
Hi, everybody.
thank you.
So yeah, I was just wondering if we offer the hybrid learning option, will the full campus still be offered or not?
In the typical recommendations for hybrid learning, you kind of run at like 50% capacity. So
Okay.
half of the students would come on particular days and the other half would come on other days. And then the days that you weren't physically in the building, you would be doing online or distance learning. So great question.
Thank you.
Yep, you're very
Now,
welcome.
I think what he's also asking is,
Could you do
all
both?
all this work we're doing to develop this school at home or whatever it is, we are still planning to be physically on campus for a full day unless the governor comes in and says we can't. So we're kind of preparing for this. So we still, if you want to come to 7 classes and do your 7 classes, you would still have that option right now at every school in the county.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep,
Thank you.
absolutely. That is the directive we're still operating under from the governor's office, is that we will open for full time for those students that and families that are ready to send their student back in August. So great.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, and the student registration survey is it can't be anonymous. It's gonna have to be student name, school, so that we can accurately identify where the needs are going to be at each school site, and so that we can keep track of who has registered essentially and who we still need to track down through phone calls and school-based contact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right, Danny. Yep. All right, so we'll plan to be back together again Monday at 10 a.m. and we'll all work on our homework of giving feedback around the attendance and grading policies, as well as capturing some of our community partnerships. And then I'll work on my pieces as well through Polk Virtual and some of the information about students participating, logins, and we had another question in the chat about the Wi-Fi for the buses that have been out. So I'll work on those pieces, and we definitely appreciate you guys. I know we went a little long today, but it's important work, and just appreciate the collaboration. So if you think of anything, send in questions and we'll keep brainstorming.
Michelle, updating? Which one are we? I'm looking in the folder now, and there's teacher ICP support document and PCPS instructional continuity plan 420. So which one are we looking at?
Let me get back there to that screen.
Make sure I'm getting the right one to look at and edit.
So in the spring, when we transitioned quickly, we essentially had two documents. The ICP was the one that went public and on the website. And then the teacher ICP had some of the behind the scenes pieces that we needed to communicate just to teachers about grading. I think that's in that part. But with the state's new guidance, if you look on our instructional team objectives page, they want all that embedded in one document now. So if you see like section 3 that says responsibilities, and then there's all those bullets under teacher responsibilities, most of what is right there is what we had in the teacher support document that was only shared with staff. They're wanting us to put that out in the public document as well.
Okay, so if I want to print something and take it with me to make marks on, what should I print? Both of those two?
Probably both, because ultimately we'll be integrating those two into one document following the outline there on our objectives page today. So the bullets that are in the objectives page, that is directly from the state, and those are the sections and the sequential order in which our new ICP will have to be written. The state doesn't really give us a template, if you will, but they give us that list of these are all the sections you must have in this order fleshed out. So,
and this is what the instructional teams are working on in the background, putting what we already have kind of in this order.
Yeah, they're trying to get the formatting. So I don't want to waste anybody's time on formatting. Our time needs to be spent in these rich conversations like what we had today.
Okay.
So, all right.
And I'm gonna also put in the OneDrive the survey that Christy had sent me, so that we can, as a group, start looking at that and maybe adding and editing and seeing what we want it to look like.
Perfect. And as I get the data, I'll drop it in there too, and then shoot a little message that I placed it in there.
Okay.
All right.
We want to change the online option through the school to the distance learning option through the school in that survey that I initially sent you, so that we don't tie ourselves that. Just change that word from online to distance, and then that virtual is online, but the other one, that way we got.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
All right. Awesome. All right.
Thanks,
we'll see you guys on Monday at 10.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.